This is United for Biodiversity, the Alliance podcast, a platform that unites global voices in a call to action to protect our planet's rich biodiversity. Join us for critical insights and let's stand united for biodiversity.
Welcome to this week's episode of United for Biodiversity, the Alliance podcast. I am your host, Kiana Wilberg. As we continue the discussion on protecting the world's biodiversity ahead of the landmark Global Biodiversity Alliance Summit being led by Guyana, it is my sincere honor to welcome to our podcast today Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs of the United Kingdom, David Lammy. Foreign Secretary, thank you so much for taking the time to participate in today's discussion.
Well, thank you, and thank you for all that you're doing in Guyana to press forward on the issue of climate and nature and diversity. I'm very pleased to be with you.
Thank you, Foreign Secretary. I know that our audience is excited to hear your perspectives, so I'll jump straight into our questions. Foreign Secretary, as we consider the consequences of biodiversity loss and the rate at which the world is grappling with the effects of it. I want to get your perspective on what are some of the priorities for building global partnerships to protect at least 30% of the planet's land and ocean by 2030, and how the UK is leading by example on this.
Well, look, thank you very much. I think the first thing to say is I think it's wonderful that Guyana is hosting this very important global coalition and the alliance coming together. Guyana is a country that has done remarkably well to protect its rainforests. It's a country with 80% coverage of rainforests, and people forget the huge importance that Guyana plays in the Guyana Shield and to the Amazon basin. And I'm very pleased that the United Kingdom continues to support countries like Guyana in their endeavors. We are absolutely committed to 30 by 30. It's essential that we get there. We also use our ICF and our climate finance, which totals £11.6 billion to contribute to supporting countries in their efforts. And we have a fund of 239 million supporting diversity and biodiversity globally. And I've seen programs in Guyana supporting fishing, for example, dealing with some of the issues and pollutions that come from mining. Essentially, it is important that we get alongside Amerindian communities. Also, they are the primary custodians of our biodiversity, and Guyana is in very good shape to lead on this agenda as well.
Thank you for that point, Foreign Secretary. And I think it's very important because one of the well known facts about you is that you have been a strong champion for ensuring that, the right messaging, statements are made regarding the call for action on biodiversity loss. So I do appreciate those points that you mentioned there. But how is the UK, for example, leading by example where this cause is concerned?
I'm very sad that we're having this conversation at a time when there are countries in the global north stepping back on responsibilities in this area. The UK is stepping forward as others are stepping back. So we remain committed to our pledge of 11.6 billion in our ICF funding. We remain committed in our development spend to support climate initiatives and to emphasize nature as well as climate. And we want to support countries both as they move forward on their energy and renewable energy needs, but absolutely 100% to support biodiversity loss. And you do that principally through ensuring that communities who might lose out are able to get employment and livelihoods. And that does mean standing alongside the poorest, the vulnerable, and particularly Amerindian communities. So that underpins our attitude. When I came into office a year ago, I appointed a climate and nature envoy, Ruth Davis, to help us lead on this agenda, and picked up what Zach Goldsmith had done, a great minister who cares a lot about biodiversity. And in a sense, in the United Kingdom, these issues are cross-party, and therefore our commitment to lead and to support the poorest is essential and remains intact.
Thank you, Foreign Secretary. I also want to talk a little bit about how the UK is helping to unlock more climate and nature finance, particularly for vulnerable countries. Can you say how this support regarding the UK's broader commitment to reversing the decline in global biodiversity has materialized?
Well, we are absolutely clear that the UK will use its leadership role on the board of the World Bank to assist in this area and to press for climate finance solutions that support the global south, and also particularly support small island states. Mia Motley, just next door in Barbados, has done a lot to lead on the Bridgetown agenda, particularly, and we think that there's more that needs to be done in that arena. So it's through our MDBs, it's through our support for the Caribbean Development Bank, particularly, that we can also encourage more finance. It's appalling that if you look at the continent of Africa, 3% of the global climate finance spend gets to Africa, despite the importance of the forests in areas like the Democratic Republic of the Congo. These are forests that breathe on behalf of the entire world. As I say, I'm delighted that Guyana has maintained its forests, but you will recognize that also with the oil find in Guyana, there is a danger that development also in Guyana does drive down communities to cut down trees. And it is important that we continue to support people's livelihoods. Yes, of course, support development, but development that is beneficial to nature and global harmony. And that's why we will use our leverage on the development banks like the World Bank, but also while we use our development spend in climate finance to support countries like Guyana.
Foreign Secretary, as I noted earlier, you've been an ardent advocate for global action on reversing, or rather addressing, this crisis on biodiversity loss. And given this position of yours, one of the things you've also clearly outlined is that the climate and nature crisis is central to foreign policy. Now, how is the Foreign Office ensuring that action on biodiversity loss is integrated in international work?
Well, I set out in my Q lecture last year that climate policy is security policy, that we're living in times where people are using climate to drive conflict, to drive energy crisis. And so it has to be central in the way that governments, particularly governments in the global north, seek to act. And we are absolutely doing that. That's why we're supporting initiatives in the Horn of Africa, where they're facing the tremendous effects of climate driving people to leave many of the countries in that region and try and make for Europe. That's why we're supporting the work of livelihoods in places like Brazil and Guyana. That's why we are leading where we also need to find more private finance. And I hope shortly to be coming forward with another initiative in which, yes, we're putting down UK money, but we're also trying to drive philanthropists and private equity to increase that money, to match that money, so we have more spend to go on conservation and biodiversity. That's the way we can increase the pot, because at this time, particularly with the challenges we see around the world, we have to do all we can to increase the pot. And that's unlikely to come from taxpayers only.
Thank you, Foreign Secretary. Now, I want to get your take on the role of new initiatives like the Global Clean Power Alliance. What role do you think they can play in this fight to protect biodiversity?
We've had countries like Indonesia say, how can countries like the UK help us accelerate the rate or our race to clean energy? And so I'm so pleased for us to be leading the Global Clean Power Alliance. It helps countries make the most, for example, of solar. We have countries with the benefit of the sun almost all year round that are still not able to make the most of solar energy. We have countries with wind that need the wind turbines to be able to have renewables that can power their grids. Again, this is a win for UK companies, but it's also a win for the countries involved. And what we find when you're looking at renewables, of course, is the energy's cheaper. But it's still the case that too many countries have just not got access to either the technology, access to the expertise, or access to the finance. And the Global Clean Power Alliance is an alliance of countries coming together who want to go faster and quicker in relation to those supply chains and in that race to renewables. And we in the UK are very happy to see a coalition of countries doing that. I hope that we'll be able to say more at UNGA in September. And I hope that Guyana can benefit from clean power as well, notwithstanding Guyana's developments on fossil fuel in the coming months and years.
Thank you, Foreign Secretary. Now, with your family's roots in Guyana, the host country of the inaugural Global Biodiversity Alliance Summit, and even your own involvement in establishing the Sophia Point Rainforest Research Center, I want to know how your personal experience has shaped your perspective on the importance of local conservation efforts in the global fight to protect biodiversity.
Well, I grew up with my mother and father talking about swimming in the creek, sometimes about the dangers, talking about the Berbice River. My family very much stemming from the Hopetown village up in West Coast Berbice, but also great family in Victoria and Abacalis. And so I, as a child, was fortunate to visit Guyana to just marvel at the huge biodiversity that's represented in Guyana. And then as a young adult to begin to move from just visiting those that live along the coast of the country and being able to go into the rainforest. I did a trip in my 20s right through Guyana down to Lathem and into Brazil. And then I also visited the Essequibo down opposite Bartica, and I found this to be the most charming part of Guyana, and that's why we set up the Sophia Point Centre just down there opposite Bartica and just down from Baganara Island. And it also gives the ability for students at the University of Guyana to have access to accessible research, the biodiversity students, the students studying the ecology of the country. It's far for them and expensive for them to go very far into the interior. They can get to Bartica. They can cross down in the boat from Parika. They can get to Sophia Point. They can do their research, and they can work also with Western scientists as they do that. They can work along Amerindian communities that are there in the Riverview site and the other sites that are neighborhood. So that's my commitment to the community. It's a charity, of course, that's really supporting conservation, supporting young people, supporting Amerindian communities, and helping people to understand what is in the forests of Guyana. There's much that's in the forest that still has not been documented. Countries like Brazil have had science and researchers arriving for years and years and years, but Guyana is still catching up. And I'm quite sure that, in facing the world's future pandemics, in understanding the medicines of the future, Guyana has a considerable amount to offer, as well as protecting our biodiversity. And I'm very pleased that Sophia Point is helping to make that contribution.
Foreign Secretary, I want to thank you so much for gracing us with your presence and being part of our podcast today. It was truly an honor, and I know that our audience has learned quite a lot regarding the work of the UK and your personal involvement in the fight to protect biodiversity. So thank you once
Well,
again.
let me congratulate Guyana once more on hosting the Global Biodiversity Alliance. It's going to be an amazing week. It puts Guyana on the map. It will have ricochets around the world, and I'm just very excited for Guyana. And I will be in Guyana shortly thereafterwards, but I'm excited to see what comes out of the Biodiversity Alliance in the coming days.
Thank you so much, Foreign Secretary. And to our audience, thank you as well for joining us. Be sure to continue to follow us on our respective social media handles as we bring you insights from thought leaders here and around the world regarding the fight to protect biodiversity. I'm your host, Kiana Wilberg. I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to United for Biodiversity, the Alliance podcast. Be sure to follow us for more insightful episodes on our Spotify, LinkedIn, and Facebook accounts.